So the first race of the new season is over, and wow, what a race it was. After waiting months for the Bahrain Grand Prix, I don't think I can wait 2 weeks for the next one now. While there wasn't a race for first and second, the rest of the grid was hotly contested, and there was plenty of surprises, but none were more surprising than Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin, finishing as best of the rest. So how did they manage to go from 7th on the grid to best of the rest? And why are Red Bull mad about it? You'll just have to stick around to find out, won't you? I should probably clarify something to begin with, and that's why I call Aston Martin best of the rest. Normally, that's a phrase reserved for the midfield. Well, at the moment, based on what's happened in Bahrain in the last 2 weeks, the field is broken up into 3 groups. The first group you could call the title challengers or potential race winners. Last season, that was Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes towards the end. This season, though, it's just Red Bull. Then you have the backmarkers, those who look unlikely to challenge for points at any point of the season, which is a group sadly occupied by McLaren and no one else. They were absolutely awful in Bahrain, and at the moment, there's no reason to think that will change. Then we have the midfield, or the rest, or wherever else you want to call them. That's the group that Aston Martin leads. I don't think I can remember a grid that has so obviously had a best and worst team, but that's the situation we're in, and of the other 8, Aston Martin are the best of the rest for the time being. But why are Red Bull so mad about that? Surely a team making such a massive leap up the grid should be complimented for the incredible engineering achievements of the team. And what about Fernando Alonso? Shouldn't they be congratulating him on an incredible return to the podium? Just a quick side note, but have you ever seen anyone happier to achieve a 3rd place finish in a Grand Prix? What a moment that was for him. So yeah, why are Red Bull so mad? To answer that, you need to know the history of Aston Martin as a Formula 1 team, or Racing Point as they were formerly known. In 2020, they famously fielded a car that was instantly referred to as the Pink Mercedes, because it was identical to Mercedes' 2019 car. Then, in 2022, Aston Martin made a huge switch in their sidepod design mid-season, making them look a lot like Red Bulls. With the car being dubbed the Green Red Bull at last season's Spanish Grand Prix, Red Bull asked questions while also launching an internal investigation to find any possible IP leak. The FIA cleared Aston Martin of any wrongdoing, but as Christian Horner put it, what's already in a person's head cannot be deleted. Whose head? Well, in the past 2 years, a number of Red Bull staff had made the switch to Aston Martin, with former head of aerodynamics Dan Fallows taking up the role of technical director, while ex-Red Bull designer Andrew Alesi was signed as the team's head of technical operations. No team likes it when they lose staff to another team, especially not staff members with reputations as good as that of Dan Fallows. Just look at what's happening at Mercedes at the moment. They've lost loads of staff to other teams in recent years, and the brain drain has taken effect this year, with them slipping another place down the grid. Red Bull could be worried about this happening to them as well. Losing staff to another team is one thing, but having the team they moved to fielding a car that kind of looks like your own must hurt. This season's Aston Martin is once again Red Bull-esque in its design, but unlike last year's AMR 22, it's also up there in pace too. That worries Red Bull despite the huge lead they already have over the field. I'll tell you why Red Bull are worried shortly, but first I want to show you some of the comments from the Red Bull team. Helmut Marko, being the infinite source of drama he is, took a shot at the employees that moved teams in recent years. If you compare the cars, the Aston Martin is most similar to our Red Bull, he told Sky Deutschland. There's a reason for that. Not only did Fallows change, but also some other employees, and they obviously have a good memory. Claiming that the employees that left remembered your designs and took them with them isn't something new in Formula 1. It happens all the time. As good as these designers are, coming up with completely new stuff all the time is just impossible. No one has that creativity. In another interview, he said, "It's true, what Fallows had in his head cannot be erased," said Marko. Copying the concept is not prohibited, but can you copy in such detail without having documentation of our car, he added. Is Marko trying to claim that Dan Fallows stole Red Bull drawings when he moved? I think he might be. It just doesn't come across well when you're already dominating the field, and the team you're talking about is one of the success stories of the new era, led by a driver that many people love. Did you see Alonso's move to overtake Hamilton? I literally jumped off the sofa. It was insane. But yeah, it just doesn't sit right with us that Red Bull have come into the first race of the season so far ahead of the rest of the field, and are taking time to try and belittle the new rule's greatest success story. Dr. Marko might be the usual source of comments like this on the grid, But in Bahrain, the whole Red Bull team took the chance to take a shot. It's nice to see 3 Red Bull cars on the podium, Sergio Perez said after the Grand Prix. Christian Horner said Aston Martin has proven that it is possible to develop yourself to the front of the grid, and is glad to see that RB18 has a new lease of life, claiming that Aston Martin have just taken Red Bull's design from last year. I think it demonstrates to all the teams that it's possible, he told the media in Bahrain. So they've obviously done a good job over the winter. They say imitation is the biggest form of flattery, and it's good to see the old car going so well. Horner was then asked to be serious and say if he had any regret over Fallow's exit. Horner replied, "No, because I think we have a wonderful team, and everything has to evolve, nothing stands still. And I think it's flattering to see the resemblance of that car to ours, so it was great to see the 3 of them on the podium." Horner went on to say he would not be surprised if Mercedes and Ferrari followed the lead of Aston Martin at some stage this year. "I think that the operating windows of these cars are very narrow, and every team in the top 3 looks like it's developed its own theme, and one team have adopted our theme and have made a gain, so at some point it's going to converge, and that can happen within a season." So, is Aston Martin's success all down to the fact that they've apparently copied Red Bull's car from last year and then updated it? I definitely don't think so. The whole grid has taken ideas off the RB18, especially the undercut on the side pod, which is on the AMR23. But that isn't going to provide enough performance to move the car from 7th to 2nd on the grid. It isn't like they've completely reworked their chassis to follow Red Bull's philosophy either. Aston Martin buys their engine, gearbox and rear suspension from Mercedes, so they can't change suspension and chassis design to match Red Bull's anyway. Actually, the fact that they buy so much from Mercedes, a team that's been outdeveloped over the winter by most of the grid, shows how good a job Aston Martin have done. They haven't just ripped off Red Bull side pods either. Have you seen the massive slide down the middle of the Aston Martin side pods? That's definitely not off the RB18. So as much as Red Bull might want to belittle the work of their former employees, no one else is calling the AMR23 a green Red Bull, and they should stop trying to make it into one. In the words of the great Regina George from Mean Girls, "Red Bull, stop trying to make green Red Bull happen. It's not going to happen." So where do Aston Martin go from here then? Well, there isn't a chance of an FIA investigation into copying happening like there was in 2020, because no one seems to have any kind of evidence of actual copying or design stealing going on. Everyone knows that Formula 1 teams copy what they see on each other's cars on track, and that's completely legal. Aston Martin should just ignore what sounds like a very worried Red Bull. With a testing penalty taken into account, Red Bull can only do 60% of the wind tunnel and CFD testing that Aston Martin can. So in theory, if Aston Martin manages to get 1 second a lap quicker throughout the first half of the season, Red Bull will only get 0.6 seconds faster. Obviously, it isn't as simple as that in the real world though. Red Bull might be a mile ahead of the rest of the field at the moment, but they know that those behind them are coming for them. The Aston Martin technical team were trained by Red Bull's own aero savant Adrian Newey, and that has Red Bull scared. What do you think of Red Bull trying to detract from Aston Martin's achievements? Is Red Bull's position at the front of the grid going to come under attack as the season goes on? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe to get all the news as the new season begins. Until next time, drive safe and bye for now.